Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today, instead of giving our hot take review on a game we just finished playing, we're going to be giving our hot takes on a whole bunch of games that we played over our weekend in Portland, Oregon, with our BGHT con that happened last weekend. By the time you listen to this, it will have been 2 weekends away. And this is part 2. So if you didn't hear part 1, last week we released the first couple days of game playing that we had and talked about all the games we played then. Now we're going to jump into the remainder of the weekend and talk about the remaining games that we haven't gotten to yet. And we're going to skip over any kind of poll question or intro topic today because we just want to jump in and start talking about these games. So where we left off last week, we just discussed our Sunday morning game, the Battle for Rokugan. And right after that, we set up Robot Quest Arena. This was Chris's pick and a recent Kickstarter delivery he had sent out to us. So Robot Quest Arena, good follow-up to the Battle for Rokugan. Chris, first play with adults, how'd it go?
Yeah, it was great. And just for those who have not listened to the last episode, and you should because there will be a quiz at the end of this one, there were 3 big games that were brand new to me and that I wanted to get on the table because they were new Kickstarters. They were ones I hadn't played with either with anybody at all or I'd only played with my family. Robot Quest Arena was the one I played with my family, but the other 2, My Father's Work and Lords of Ragnarok. Well, you heard about Lords of Ragnarok last week, a bit of a disaster. So I was looking for a comeback, at least in terms of my reputation as a game picker. And Robot Quest Arena, I thought, did really well. I had a lot of fun. I think everybody else did. This is an interesting game because it certainly comes across as looking family way. It's a big, chunky, colorful robot minis and a big board with kind of quasi-anime looking artwork on it. And it's kind of funny and cute and looks very much like a Saturday morning cartoon, or at least what used to be Saturday morning cartoons. In reality, this game is a pretty cool deck builder. It's very similar in a lot of ways to other deck builders like Star Realms, Hero Realms, Cthulhu Realms, anything that ends in realms. It's very similar to that. A lot of the same mechanisms like cards that can act as shields, cards that can act as events, et cetera, et cetera. And this game packs all of that into a cute package, but there's also a board that lets you do some tactical combat. So you're not just doing this sort of abstract combat like you do in Star Realms, for example, but you're actually doing some tactical combat on the board. And just a perfect example of how much fun that can be. Probably my highlight of the entire weekend was when I had this weapon called the laser beam. Unlike most of the range weapons, this one shot all the way across the board and it did damage, like 3 damage to everybody who was in line of it. And right before I drew that card, you guys so thoughtfully lined up in a straight line right across the board from me. I'm not even sure I had to move and just like wipe everybody off the face of the map. And that was so satisfying. I can't even tell you.
That was pretty cool when you laser beamed all of us. I think you ended up with like 42 points after that, kind of locking the game up for yourself. Other fun things that happened during this game. By the way, this game was absolutely fantastic, Chris, from the artwork to the little miniatures, the beautifully pre-painted giant robots that are moving around this map, to the different little traps and stuff you can push other robots into, little pits, laser beam, these little question mark boxes where you're getting free stuff out of there. It gave me the feel of almost like a Bond, like a split screen Bond where on old Nintendo 64 where everybody's running around fighting each other and doing this kind of thing. Anyway, I forget where my brain was at. I had a lot of fun playing this one. I think at one point a pit opened up too, and I placed that pit right behind Chris because he just laser beamed the bejesus out of all of us. So I put this pit right behind Chris and then set that up for Tim or Steve to push Chris right into this never-ending pit. And it's neat the way you are collecting gems when you cause damage to people or when you destroy people. That's the points. You're sort of taking their energy and collecting this energy. I don't know. I forget a lot about how much I got my butt kicked or how the game ends. It's when the all those tokens are out. So a neat way of in-game mechanism. You're just, however many respawns, there's a cap on respawns. So once those respawns are out of there, that's when the game ends. I had so much fun playing this one. Tim, I want to ask you a question. I've played a few of these tabletop skirmishy kind of games, and I didn't like any of them. And I think this one does it better than any of the ones I've played myself or heard about. The only ones I've really played are like Dragon Prince, which isn't that good, And then you've talked about a Disney one that you've played, Tim, and maybe you've played a few others, but this one is by far the one that I want to play.
Yeah, I think why it worked so well as a tabletop skirmish game was one of the problems with skirmish games is most of them give you action points or something like that. And you have to spend action points on movement. And it's always like, do I get next to somebody, use my action points, and then they're just going to crush me on the next turn to get close to them? And it just never quite works. It never feels like fun decisions. What was great about the formula of Star Realms in this tactical skirmish format is that you don't make choices really. Like what you draw your hand of cards, you lay them down, and you've got X movement and you've got X attack. And yeah, if you don't use the movement, you can use it to buy stuff. That's true. But there was some motivations to get close to people. It's the only way you're doing damage. You get points every time you damage somebody. So you're motivated to go up next to them. But also there's motivation to get to the middle of the board because you get points if you're there at the end of the round. And so it always felt like I was driven to get close to people, and I felt good about it. I never felt like I was wasting actions to do that or trying to run away after I didn't attack. And so for some reason that all worked. And this really is, it feels just like playing Star Realms. I mean, almost everything is a 1-for-1 comparison when you think about the cards. But the problem with a game like Star Realms in a 4-player or 3-player game is that you're having to choose to attack somebody. And that's less fun. Are you ganging up on somebody? You're going to try to take someone out. It's just got this king-making ability here. Well, Robot Quest Arena never felt like that. It was kind of like you attacking whoever you were close to, or you're trying to line yourself up for a clever move, prevent your opponent who you knew they drew a card that could laser beam you across the table if you remembered. Try to prevent them from getting set up like something like that. But it never felt king-making at all. It just felt like I'm going to get in there, do as much damage as I can, draw some fun cards. It was just pure fun the whole time. And the card abilities were wonderfully thematic. The different attack weapons you could get, or the different shields, or the effects were all really fun to draw and laugh about the name of them and the cute artwork. You guys mentioned the minis. It's like calling it a painted mini doesn't do it justice, because these were like the weight and feel and quality of something you'd buy off the toy shelf that's based on like a Saturday morning cartoon. I mean, this felt like it could have come out of an old He-Man blister pack or something like that. Like, these are super high quality toys. And that's what I would call them. These are toys that were out on the board, and they were so fun to move around and play with. So yeah, the production on this was brilliant for what is a fairly simple game, but the gameplay was just fun. This is not a game that you have to play with a family member. This is a game that I think anyone can get on the table and just have a good time with. I felt it went just a tad long, and that might have been partly a new play, maybe on a second play where we all know the basic movements and cards and stuff. It would have gone a little quicker. So other than that, I thought it was great. Had a ton of fun with this one.
Hey, Tim, I want to go back to something you just said. And I think one thing that does make this a good game to play with families, but not by any means necessity that this is only going to be a family game, but why it is good for families, is the fact that there isn't that take that aspect, which you were talking about, the king making and whatnot. Because in this game, there really is no downside to you to getting hit, really. It may move you back to your respawn point, but you're not attacking that person and causing them to lose anything, really. All it's going to do is make them respawn, and you get some points. So in the end of the game, it's not like a last man standing kind of thing. It's whoever has the most points. And like you said, every time you hit somebody, you get some of those points. And so I don't care if you hit me, or you hit Adam, or you hit Steve. It makes no difference to me. I'm going to respawn, and I'm going to go back and do all the things I would have done anyway. So it never feels like I'm being attacked, or you're being attacked, or you're really targeting anybody. And I think that actually makes this a good thing, sort of psychologically. If you were going to play this with a young player, which you certainly could do, it feels a little bit less brutal or attacky.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. And when you did respawn, you were usually close enough to do something fun still on your turn, even if it wasn't to attack somebody. There were some spaces, some variable spaces on the board that you could move to. And if you start your turn there, the next time you get some benefit for it. So it always felt like there was something worthwhile to do.
Yeah, the respawn, you got to choose from one of 4 spots, or 5. If you're one of the characters, you got to go in the middle. I think that was, no, you just got a point. No, you could respawn in the middle. So that was cool. And then that last energy for wiping somebody off the map gave you 2 points instead of 1. So you're incentivized to finish somebody off. So you didn't feel bad. It was just targets of opportunity. You're like, yeah, I get it. They have to take me out because I'm almost dead. They're going to get that extra point if they wipe me off, as opposed to getting, just 1 point off of wiping out Chris. So no hard feelings, just a fun romp around this map with these fantastic little characters, little robots.
Totally. Yeah. If you just want to have a good time, you should check this game out. It's going to be a good time, I think, for almost everybody. Well, next was my choice, and I brought in to bring us down a little bit from the joy of the Battle for Rokugan and Robot Quest Arena, but I brought in Woodcraft, one of the classic Euros, but a Euro that my couple plays of it I found to be very unique and very interesting. I was really excited to get back to it, and I was excited to play a 4-player game of it. But I'm really interested to hear how you guys felt about it, because I didn't hear a whole lot. What do you think of Woodcraft?
I actually liked it quite a bit. You spent a lot of time kind of doing that lead up, like, I really don't think you're going to like this, but I want you to please be kind to me. I actually really liked this game. I enjoyed it. I thought it had really nice mechanisms. Some of the things were so thematically cool and also worked well within the gameplay structure, such as using your saw to cut a 3 die into a 1 die and a 2 die of that type. I mean, that's just cool. That's a really good thematic element. But rather than focus on the mechanics, which I think you guys are going to do more of, I do want to talk about the production on this game. And I actually thought this game shone in a way that I think, Tim, you didn't really let on when you talked about it. You talked about how you didn't like the art. I actually found the art quite charming. It has these kind of oddball elves, and I guess, art is always subjective. Some people are going to like it. Some people are not going to like it. I actually thought it was really cute. It was really adorable. The colors in this game, I thought, were absolutely wonderful, which is ironic because just last episode, I was talking about La Granja, or at least the earlier version of La Granja before the deluxe master set, and complaining about greens and browns and beiges. And those are often kind of jokey buzzwords we use for a bad production. But in this game, the colors were yellow and green and brown, but they weren't these like lame milk toasty colors. They were these dark forest greens and these, dark brown that looked like chocolate or looked like, the wood that you're cutting up. And I actually loved having these big handfuls of dice in these really robust forest colors. I thought that was beautiful. The little player mats looked like little sawmills. They were very rustic looking. I enjoyed looking at this game the whole time we were playing it, and I don't know what it was about them, but those dice cast a spell on me. I really loved having those multicolored dice that looked like bits of wood or other forest stuff. I thought that was a lot of fun. Overall, had a great game. I would happily play this one again.
Yeah, Chris, right off the bat, you mentioned the dice. You were enchanted by those. A little bit less enchanting was these elves for me as far as production-wise. Their eyes are so creepy. They're giving you this stare down, this kind of staring into your soul. And while they're making these wood products, like, here's your rocking chair, I'm going to destroy you in your sleep. So that was a little creepy for me. The rest of the production I thought was fantastic as well. And the theme, this game was incredibly thematic, except for a couple parts. The action selection, which is a Vladimir Suchi special. You take a thing here and put it over here, kind of like Praha could put Regni, take a little wedge and put it on this other wedge. It was neat. Thematically, I don't know if it made sense to me. It was fun, though. And then the tools on the roof, tools on the ceiling. It was a neat puzzle, but then thematically lost me on those couple parts. I had fun playing this one. The glue mechanism was neat, and the saw mechanism was neat. Like Chris was saying, you could also glue 2 smaller pieces of wood together, different types if you wanted to, and kind of do a veneer and turn it into the higher quality wood, which I thought that was kind of fun. You get more points for it too, which seemed a little sketch, but that worked in my favor a few times. So had a lot of fun playing Woodcraft, even though Tim was trying to ruin everybody's day with a in-depth, relatively high-weight Euro game. I had a lot of fun playing it.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad you guys like this. To be clear, Chris, I never said I didn't like the artwork, because I actually like the production once you get in the box. I just don't like the box cover, even though it's like the same artist and the same style of art that's inside. I think just blown up like that, it doesn't feel very artistic. It feels very, very plain. But when you put those on the smaller cards, I thought they were cute and they worked just fine. Yeah, it occurred to me, Adam, the reason why when you glue 2 different types of wood together, you get more points for it. Well, that's like, if you ever see like wood crafting where they kind of make, different shapes in a wood. So inset wood pieces and stuff like that, where you can kind of give it a texture like that. I think that's why.
That makes tons of sense. And also I want to talk about the blueberries. The currency here is blueberries, which also makes a lot of sense. No, it doesn't. No. Maybe you have some explanation for that, Tim, but I really doubt it.
They're elves. I think that's just how elves do, how elves trade in the forest. So yeah, mechanically, this game still hit for me. I really had fun with it. In fact, I had so much fun that when we got home. Yesterday is the first time I had a chance to kind of think about games again, and I set it up and started playing a solo game last night before I get interrupted. Can't wait to finish that this weekend because it's a pretty clever solo system, it seems. Just to call out again, the crafting of the dice is so unique here. Like, it's order fulfillment, but it's an interesting puzzle to make the things that you need to fill the order. So that's fun. But I really like the action wheel too, and I think it's shown at 4 players because this is the type of game where it's mostly solitaire and you could kind of do your own thing. And so playing it with 2 players is perfectly fine. But with 4, that action wheel really moved a lot more, and there was more opportunities to jump on some of the big bonuses that got left behind for you. So I thought it was really fun at 4 players. I think this is one I'll have to bring back out with my local Euro group quite a bit. Good time on this one. Glad you guys liked it as well. Next, we revisited a game we haven't played for a little while, but we did a feature review on it maybe a year and a half ago, and that was Brian Boru, High King of Ireland. Adam brought this game, and the first time for the 4 of us to get back together and play it since that review. What do you think, Chris? Another trick taker, 2 in one weekend. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I like Brian Boru. I liked Brian Boru the last time we played it. I mean, it's never going to be a favorite game of mine, but it's good fun. And for me personally, it was interesting because since we played it last, I actually went to Ireland on a family trip and saw the original Brian Boru harp, which is the symbol of Ireland, at Trinity College Library in Dublin. So that kind of gave it a little bit of a personal feel to it. And looking at the map, I knew all the places now. But this game is neat. Well, first of all, the cards are these great tarot-sized cards, which makes the card play a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. Trick taking, it's trick taking. It's nothing super unique there. But the way that you play out the tricks on the board, the effects that happen on the board because of those tricks, I thought keeps it interesting. Now, having said all that, it manages to take, romance and warfare and, faith and all these like really deep, meaningful concepts in life and reduce them to tracks in a trick taking game. So if we move up high enough on the track, you're going to get married. You're going to find romance. You're going to find love. And what were the Vikings? The Vikings are the bad guys. They're these little tokens with a helmet on it. And you conduct warfare by take those Vikings off the board. And it feels so bloodless, but at the same time, the overall effect of it, I think, is good. And I do enjoy this game a lot.
You somewhat redeemed yourself there at the end, Chris, saying you kind of enjoyed it, but you're not doing this game justice with the production here and the tracks. Like, this game is amazing. The tracks are so fun. The production is fantastic. It's interesting, right? This game is neat. It uses wooden discs and it uses these circles for the monasteries and for the target city that the trick is being played for that round. I think it does so much with so little. You're right. It is just like a lot of circles and chits and flat stuff. And I'm sorry it doesn't have miniatures, Chris. Maybe we had a big giant Brian Boru. We could throw that guy on the middle of the map and be like, I had a lot of fun playing this game. It's a lot different than any of the other games that we played. The decisions are fun for me. Which city is going to be the target city? Am I going to try to pit Tim and Steve against each other? I know they both need this region. Let's see what kind of cards they're throwing out here. A lot of interesting choices. I like the memory aspect on some of these tracks. If you're not in first place, your token or your Viking chips or your monastery chips, they all are going to stay out there on the board for subsequent rounds. I think that's pretty neat. And then, of course, the area control, area majority is pretty neat as well. You're changing hands for these territories. If you're the first one to get the territory, that's a big advantage because someone has to go over top of majority with you to gain it back. So fun decisions all around. I think moment of the game for me was when Chris won a red territory, a Viking territory with, I think, a 2. One of the lowest cards in the game, he won a Viking territory with. I went right after him. I could have taken it. I figured one of these other guys would throw down a higher card, but nope. He won this Viking territory with a 2. That was masterful, Chris. And it might have won you the game.
Politics, man. Politics.
I remember when we reviewed this one, I had fun with it, but my review of it was kind of, it was okay, right? I wasn't super excited about it, but I also remember that I had like a terrible night or a terrible day going into that night and being kind of in a grumpy mood that day. So I always chalked it up to my mood. But I think my feelings after the second play pretty much matched up with my first, which is that it was a fun game. I think what didn't quite hit for me is it's a big board game, but it really does feel like the weight of a trick-taking game. It's almost doing the same thing Cat in the Box is, right? If you win the trick, you get to put another token down, which might get you area control. It's just got a few more mechanisms going, like, a few more tracks to track. It's really a trick-taking game that's presenting itself as a board game, but without the fun restriction of a typical trick-taking game. You're never knocked out of a trick. You don't have to play on suit ever. And so there's not that restriction and that kind of like getting forced with a negative or forced with something you don't want because you can't quite hit the numbers. So it just slightly misses for me as a trick taker, and it slightly misses for me as an area control game, but it doesn't make it a bad game. It's just that it's not a favorite. I did like the production a lot. I think the big tarot cards are great. I think the look and feel of the game is a lot of fun, and it's a game I'm happy to go back to, but it's just not, it's not amazing for me. That's all.
So, Tim, am I understanding you correct to say that the restriction that it didn't have is what made it less fun for you?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things I like about trick taking generally is, you're really like having to force to play what other people might have in their hands. In this game, although obviously you do play around that a little bit, that's how Chris got that too, because I didn't happen to have a red card and I was the last one going. Everyone else left it to me and I couldn't deal with it. But I was never locked out on anything, or I never didn't get anything for it. So it just felt like the weight, okay, yeah, I can't get in this suit, so I'm not going to be the winner of the trick, but I'm going to get some other bonus that's almost as good anyway by getting the bottom of the other suit I'm playing. So it just doesn't have that kind of the tension that trick taking usually brings for me. But it's a cool way to introduce trick taking into a board game. So, I think it does a good job of blending the two, just doesn't hit like the best of either category for me.
I see what you're saying, Tim. Just to come back on that a little bit. Yeah, for a lot of trick-taking games, I do like that too, Tim. I like you have to stay on suit unless you can break it and go trump. So I think that aspect is definitely missing here, but the attention shifts for me in this game when we sorted out the cards and saw which color was highest, had the highest card value for which color. I think that clarified a lot of things for me. So you're kind of counting the highest color of each card coming out, and then if that second highest card is going to be a winner or not, a guaranteed winner. So the focus shifts a little bit for me from, this is going to be a guaranteed area, or do I want to cause havoc by making these guys throw away their good cards on some other territory? So you're right. It's a different decision, not classical trick taking at all. But this play, I thought some other nuances showed up, and that was entertaining for me.
That's a great point, Adam. And I think if anyone's playing it for the first time, you should spread out the cards and show people what the numbers are. Because we, after like the first couple turns or after the first trick or something like that, we did that and we're like, oh, okay, it all makes a lot more sense now how to play it from here. Brian Brew, High King of Ireland, thanks for bringing it, Adam. It was fun to revisit. Our last game of the night, I wanted to go with a lighter one, and the game that was picked was Downforce. This is a game that we reviewed fairly recently on our Downforce versus Heat episode. These guys were really excited for me to bring. It's one of the games I brought up with me. How'd Downforce go on a second play, Chris?
It went great. And just to add a little bit of color commentary here, the reason why we were playing the game so late and the reason why we needed something lighter was because I convinced you guys to go out and do something off-brand and not game-related. We went to a pinball arcade, which is a little bit more of my thing. I hope everybody had a nice time, but we went and we played pinball for an hour or two after dinner, and so we got back and it was pretty late. We were looking for something light and easy and fun. Oh my goodness, does this game hit the mark on that one? What a goofy, fun game Downforce is. I think we all felt it when we did our initial review of it. And it felt just as much fun, if not more fun, the second time, because this time we had all the enjoyment of the game without having to learn it and checking the rules, which there wasn't much of the first time, but there was a little. And just overall, such a great time. I love the bidding mechanism on the cars. I like how you get to bet on who you think is going to win the race, and you could actually lose the race and still win because you bet on the person who did end up winning the race. And I love how you have to move other people's cars forward, even if you don't want to, based on the cards that are in your hand. And there's that little bit of strategy that you can apply where, if you get the right car up into the corner and jam it up so that everybody gets backed up behind them, you can make it so you waste those extra moves that the other cars ought to be getting. All of those are pretty light, but really enjoyable strategic decisions. And we played 2 games of Downforce, and I thoroughly enjoyed each one.
Yeah, a couple things here. I want to rewind to the pinball, Chris. That was one of the highlights of the weekend for me. Listeners, you got to see Chris play some pinball games. He has got the touch, the feel of these machines. There was Indiana Jones ones there. He's like, Adam, one of the best things in pinballing is the multi-ball for the Temple of Doom one. And then he goes and triggers it 5 minutes later and 8 freaking pinballs are coming out of this Temple's head, falling all over the pinball machine. And Chris is having such a good time navigating the tilt and playing with the finesse of a Tommy from a Who song. It was just fantastic. I had so much fun watching you play, Chris. That was one of the highlights of the weekend for me. Thanks for getting us out, and I had such a blast playing pinball and watching you play. Fantastic.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah. Back to Downforce. I had such a blast playing this as well. We played the weird Train to Nowhere map for the first game, which was fun to get back into it. And then we played the Long Beach map, is what we're going to call it, the Long Beach Formula One track on the backside of that. And it really, really evoked memories of Long Beach. 3 out of 4 of us have some kind of connection to Long Beach. So we're like, oh, this is the marina. This is where the restaurant is. Anyway, we played that. I thought the auction was fantastic. You could kind of measure, unless somebody was totally bluffing, you could kind of measure somebody's relative strength in a certain color of car by what they were bidding on that car. So I thought the auction really had a lot more character. It sunk in a lot more for me on these second and third plays than it did on the first play. So that was fun. And then Chris and I had the same idea. We were just kind of cheaping out, holding out to the end, and we getting all our cars for $1 a piece at the end, or 1 million, whatever it is, just the cheapest amount that we could get it for. And it seemed like it worked out pretty well. How these plays of Downforce go for you, Tim?
Yeah, super fun. I mean, the game is 3 simple phases: the bidding, the racing, and then the betting that happens a few times during the game. They're so easy to teach and so easy to get into, but a lot of fun decisions to make every turn. And this is exactly when you want to play this game, at 10 o'clock at night after having several beers or several cocktails, and everyone's just kind of loopy and having a fun time. Perfect time to play this. So it was great to revisit it with you guys. I'm glad you still enjoyed it. I played it quite a bit since we played together that first play, and I've had a fun time every time. And everyone I've introduced it to has had a good time as well. So definitely a hit and a keeper for me, and glad that we got a chance to revisit it. In fact, we finished the first game, and immediately everyone's like, okay, now I remember how it goes. We got to replay this one again. And it's like a 25, 30-minute game, I feel like. It goes so quick. So great game for this type of night. All right, so we wrapped up Sunday night, and Monday was going to be Adam's last day. He had to go home, late Monday afternoon. So we knew we were going to get one more game in with Adam. And so we'll talk about that. Chris, Steve, and I stuck around, and so we got several more games to finish after. But I think it was Steve's pick, and Steve really wanted to get another game of Nemesis in. This is a game that Chris, Steve, and I played together at the last Portland Con about a year and a half ago. And then we all reviewed after playing on Tabletop Simulator at one point. So Nemesis, Chris, revisit it. It's been a little while since you taught it. How'd it go for you?
It was good. This is a game that has so much story to it. I always love that. And there was a great story at the end of this one that I'll talk about in a second. But I also want to give a little bit of a qualification to earlier reviews of this game. And maybe this has something to do with my disillusionment with Lords of Ragnarok. But one thing that frustrated me here, and this is an Awakened Realms game, just like Lords of Ragnarok is that this time, for the first time I played it, I felt like the heaviness of the setup and the details and the constantly going back and looking at the turn order pieces started to weigh on me a little bit. It wasn't anything like Lords of Ragnarok, and I still had a really good time playing the game, but it didn't feel effortless, which is the way you want a game to go when you're playing something that you know, and I've played this game multiple times. There was more upkeep than I felt like I really wanted to do. But having said all that, I still think this is a great game, especially if you're looking for something where there's a storytelling experience, where you have then here you have the semi-co-op, which I still think is the only way to do co-op, where you've got your own goals. And I mean, the paranoia level in this game, just like previous plays, really does kind of make the game. I don't know what you're trying to do. You don't know what I'm trying to do. Maybe we're working together. Maybe we're not working together. Maybe you're going to lock me in an airlock with an alien. Who knows what's going to happen? The story in this one ended up being absolutely, I think, hilarious. We were on the ship, of course, and I go back to the back of the ship and check the engines. I'm the mechanic, and I say, okay, engines are all good to go. Tim's I forget who you were. You were the scientist.
The scientist, yeah.
Yeah, Tim's a scientist. He goes up to the cockpit and says, yep, the ship is going to Earth. So we go, okay, everybody starts making their way to get ready to get on the hibernation chambers. And that's when all hell breaks loose and everybody's kind of heading back there. But there's aliens popping up here and there. And Adam had a mission to send a signal and he had to go to the right place. But then the aliens all congregated around there. By the end of the game, everybody was dead except for me. And I finally made it into the hibernation chamber. And Tim was kind of chuckling because he hadn't actually set the ship to go to Earth. He had set it to go to Mars. And my goal said I had to get to Earth. And so I'm in the hibernation chamber and I couldn't reset it, of course, because at that point, everybody else is dead, so they can't be reset. And I'm in the hibernation chamber. But then I looked at my goal card again, and it was either make it to Earth or be the only player who survives. Yeah, so I didn't even think about that goal all game. So I'm like, I'm not going to try to kill everybody else. I don't want to do that. I just want to make it to Earth. But then I went back and like, oh, so I actually did manage to pull out a survival victory in that one, which was great fun. But I'm curious to hear how you guys felt about your play, and did any of that rules fatigue hit you guys like it did me?
Yeah, mixed emotions on this one for me as well, Chris. The rolls for noise was just tedious for me every time. And draw a little thing, and the bag development one or whatever, and everybody has to roll for noise and put a guy down. Out pops another alien. Here we go, another combat. Blah blah blah. Draw a card, get a scratch, get a wound. And that just got too repetitive for me. I was getting a little tired of that. And I think that I was also like, oh, am I going to make this flight? Am I going to make this flight? That didn't help for sure. If you could be more relaxed and I didn't have that kind of pressure going, then that would have been something I didn't have to worry about. But the narrative is solid here. There was one point in the game where, like you said, I had to send this signal. There was like 3 or 4 aliens trying to tear me to pieces. I had to stay in there and try to send this signal for my goal. Steve had a grenade. He rolled a grenade into the same room that I was in. And the rules with a grenade, it does all kinds of damage to the aliens. And I guess the little human can hide behind the alien carcasses or something. They don't get as affected as much. So it's like a light wound for humans, and the aliens take all this kind of damage. And I think he killed 2 or 3 of them, and then one of them ran away. So it was a pretty neat moment of the game. I was able to send my signal. I still died anyway. I don't know when I died, going to the hyperbaric chambers, and I got slaughtered. So mixed emotions, fun story, fun narrative, but the path to getting there is riddled with delays and rules, rules fiddliness and dice rolls. So that's where I'm sitting with Nemesis right now. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, it was the same for me. It definitely started off rough. Like the first handful of turns, I just got so tired of us kind of having to check, okay, now what happens? Okay, do this roll. And, that didn't get better necessarily. And it was, I think, the first time out of the 3 plays I've had where the noise checks and the alien development, the bag building that, like Adam mentioned, they really felt like, oh God, did we really need to include this? Couldn't they have done this in a simpler way rather than this, the same redundant action all the time? But that said, it did tell a really fun story here. Chris kind of mentioned my favorite moment of the game. He mentioned that he went and checked an engine and told us what was going on, but I don't trust Chris. So I managed to find this other room that lets you look over a computer and see what the engine states are. So I was able to verify all 3 of the engines were active. Like he said, he had checked 2 of them. He said they were. So I was like, cool, I feel good about this. I don't know why no one checked me, but I went up to the cockpit, and when I first looked, it was headed at deep space. So I was straightforward. I told everybody, I was like, guys, we're going to deep space. So I'm going to adjust it. Does anyone mind if we, like I kind of said, does anyone mind where we go? And a couple people were like, nah, I don't really care. And Chris is like, yeah, I'd like it if we went to Earth. I was like, perfect, I can get to Earth. And my goals were either go to Earth and destroy the nest on the ship, or you can just go to Mars. And I was like, well, if someone checks me and then they change it to Earth, I can live with that. But it'll be easier for me if I just go to Mars. So I set it to Mars. I told them, okay, we're going to Earth, and nobody checked.
How dare you?
I ended up dying because of some stupid mistakes. Like I took some extra actions I didn't need to. I ended up dying when I could have probably gotten off and hibernated. And I die, and Chris goes, so Tim, before I get in this hibernation chamber, are we really going to Earth? And just to keep the theme, because there's no way you could ask a dead body where you're going, I just said, it's exactly like I told you. So he gets in he gets in the hibernation chamber, and I immediately turn on the radio. I turn on Life on Mars by David Bowie to see if he catches the connection. And like 30 seconds in, he looks at me, goes, Tim, is this a foretelling of where we're at?
That was good. That was really good.
I loved it. It was so fun. And then, Steve and Adam had this funny thing where Steve just had to keep somebody alive. So he picked Adam to glom on too. He's got all these bandages and everything. He's like the scout or whatever. So he's got all these supplies. He's following Adam around trying to help him. Adam's got all this ammo. So it's like, Steve's like, I'm totally safe here. But then they just got loaded up with monsters, and everything bad that could go wrong started going wrong for them. They both ended up getting knocked out before they got to the hibernation. So yeah, it tells a fun story, but it's just, it's hard. It's hard. I honestly think this is another game where, even though it's not as bad as Lords of Ragnarok, they really should have streamlined or cut out like 5 or 6 mechanisms here, it would have been a better play. It would have been more fun. It would have been easier to get into. So such a close hit, but maybe it's worth it for some of the theme that comes through, especially if you play it regularly. But I could have done without a few extra pieces to make it more streamlined. Still would be okay playing this one again. It was still fun.
I would sum this one up by saying that Lords of Ragnarok absolutely went way overboard with the rules. There's no way that could be fun. I think that with Nemesis, depending on the mood that you're in and your tolerance for the rules, there is still a place where this game is a blast. And if you don't mind a little bit extra rules overhead, have at it. It's a great time. The storytelling is terrific. But if you're not in the mood for something pretty heavy in terms of the maintenance, upkeep, and rules, better play something else. Play some Downforce.
Well said. All
right. Well, Adam had to check out at this point. So, it's awesome that Adam, he's going to stick around for the rest of the podcast tonight,
Bye, guys.
But he had to run out to the airport. So I think that's when we went and got some lunch. I've been asking for sushi all weekend. So we finally got my sushi. It was awesome. And Chris had one more big game that he bought, a big, post Kickstarter game that he was so super excited about. And that was My Father's Work. Did a good job of teaching it to us. Pretty straightforward. Chris, what do you think? How did My Father's Work hit for you? You had such high expectations.
This game met my expectations. I understood that it was going to be a long game. That's something that we had talked about. I think it was maybe a year and a half ago. It was one of our beginning of the year things I want to play.
Yeah.
And we had talked about this one, or I had brought this one up. We acknowledged that this would be a tough one because it's advertised on the box as being a 3-hour game. But in reality, that's not because of the mechanisms. This is not a heavy game. There's not a lot of rules overhead. There's not a lot of complexity. It's actually pretty basic worker placement. You go to a space, you get a resource. You go to another space and you do an action with that resource. It's really simple stuff. And what makes this game special, but also makes it a long one, it's the storytelling aspect. And that's done through the means of an app, which quite frankly, I thought was great. I thought the app did a really nice job, other than some technical issues that we'll come back to. But it was amusing. It was quite. The story was funny. The story was engaging. At every waypoint, it was giving you some new direction to go into. I mean, by the end of this one, we were starting World War III and eating the dead bodies of our foes. I mean, this was like pretty epic story. Yeah, it was epic storytelling. Lots and lots of fun. The problem we had was that there was a glitch in the app that didn't recognize one of the decisions that we had made. Hopefully that's not something that's going to keep popping up again and again in different places for different people on different paths. But what ended up happening was we made a pretty significant decision. The app didn't recognize it and kind of kept treating it like it didn't happen. So I won't get into what the details of what that means, but that was unfortunate. It kind of threw us off. We took some time trying to fix it, try to reinstall the app and things like that. That was unfortunate. We also had a misread of a couple of the cards, which was very important because we were supposed to draw one set of cards and we accidentally drew two sets of cards, one of which we weren't supposed to have because they weren't marked particularly well. But other than those couple of complaints aside, I actually thought this game was a lot of fun. I would love to play it again. And I think now kind of having a better understanding of how to avoid the issues that we ran into the first time, I think would make a second play a lot of fun. That said, it is a long game. It's a 3-hour game minimum. And that's not the kind of thing you're going to want to play every day. So maybe next con, if we want to get it out again, that would be great. I would definitely look forward to playing this one again.
Chris and Tim, I'm looking at the production here and it looks absolutely fantastic. You got these little vials. Do they come filled with stuff? Or are you supposed to fill them with your own sort of goop? So that's one thing I want to hear about. And then I'm guessing, Chris, you went all in on all the metal stuff. It looks like there's these cogs, these little gears. Those look amazing. How do those tie in? What's the story here? I guess don't throw in any spoilers, but what's the general overview of what's happened in this game?
So the story here is that basically you're to the descendant. First round of the game, you're the descendants of some mad scientist. Let's say, just as an example, you are, Dr. Frankenstein's children. And so you are now taken over his estate, and you know that he's had this big lifelong project, this major mad scientist breakthrough that he was trying to accomplish. And so now your goal is to try to complete that. And it's represented by a card. And that card has a whole bunch of prerequisites to try to build it up and meet this card before the end of the game. But the story is told over 3 generations. So you have your first round, or kind of your first generation, which is played over 3 rounds. And after that generation, you kind of restart. You get rid of almost everything you did except for a few things that your engine allows you to carry over. And then you are playing the same thing through 3 rounds in the next generation. And you do that one more time for the 3rd generation. And so part of the puzzle of the game is to try to carry through just enough stuff that helps you be able to build up enough of an engine by the end of the game to build your father's work. Or even if you don't, which I didn't in that game, you still have lots of other ways to score points. And so that's kind of the theme of it. It's it's a little quirky because apparently you're all like cousins. So all of the competitive players are cousins. So they're all kind of in the same family. And so a lot of the same stories happening to you, but really the story would be told as if, you're the way you're playing it. It's kind of like if it's just one family, but they turn it into a competitive game that way. The production is fantastic. Absolutely blew me away. Crazy thing about it, Adam, is like those vials you're talking about, which like are little, glass bottles with corks in them, are literally just a resource. Like there's a resource you can pick up that is just a, I don't know, chemical or a science thing or whatever. And it's this, you get this full glass vial. The best guess I can take with some of the components that they used here is that they found some manufacturer that already makes these components, sells them in bulk, and then they built the game around it or kind of threw them into the game because like those vials didn't quite match up to the iconography of the game. But there was other crazy choices they used. Like one of the resources you can collect are gears, like little metal gears, and they were really nice, like bronze gears with a little bit of a wash on them, but there was multiple different sculpts of these gears in there. So it wasn't even like you just got metal gears, but you got many different types of metal gears for no reason other than that probably somebody already manufactured these things and sold a collection of them as a set. So the resources were over the top. You could collect animals that were different shapes of animals, all with different things printed, different decals printed on them. So it might be a wolf or a cow or whatever. You could collect dead bodies, which were represented by these little coffins, but a bunch of the coffins had different artwork on it. So they really went above and beyond in a way that you didn't need to at all. The workers that you're using were a bunch of different washed minis for all those workers, different sculpts. But it was fun to tell a story because you got to pick your main character and their spouse. And so you could pick the creepy crypt keeper looking guy as your main character and, the debonair man as the spouse or whatever, you could mix and match whoever you wanted to. And then your groundskeeper, who was supposed to be the creepy dude that couldn't go into town, you could have picked the beautiful woman for that. So you could kind of tell a fun story just with the choices they gave you with the components. Let me talk a little bit about the gameplay here. Chris mentioned it's pretty basic worker placement, and it is really almost the most basic of worker placement. As you mentioned, you send a worker out, you get a resource. And in fact, you can't even block in this game, but there is a cost if you're not the first person to go to a space out in town. Someone else can go there and they have to pay a coin. So it just costs them a little bit more. But what was interesting is that different workers that you had could only go to certain spaces. Like there were some workers that could go out into town, and if your main worker went there, they could double the resources that were there. If one of your workers could only go into your own little house, which had a few special actions, and then like some of your workers could only go into town. So there were some little restrictions you were working around, and that was interesting enough. But otherwise, this is like the most straightforward mechanisms game. And I think it had to be. And I think it was important that they did this because what they were really trying to do was give you a Euro game that told a really, truly epic story with branching storylines. And this worked in a way I did not expect. So this is not a campaign game. You play one game. There's in the base box, or at least the box that Chris has, there's basically 3 different tuck boxes. And each is going to represent kind of a different timeline, a different storyline you can go through. But within that tuck box happens to be a whole bunch of different components. And in your storyline, based on the decisions you make, you may only interact with certain components or certain cards in there. So it tells a unique and epic story with just one box. You only have 3 different storylines, but each of those storylines are going to end up in multiple different ways depending on the choices you make during the game. And so if they combined that level of storytelling and variability into a game that had heavier mechanisms or more complex mechanisms, it would have just been an overload. It's already a challenge to try to add in new rules mid-game, which is what this has to do. So it can't be super complicated to start with. So that makes a lot of sense. And in fact, this game reminded me so much of Charterstone. And don't get me wrong, if you didn't like Charterstone, that doesn't mean you wouldn't like this. And if you love Charterstone, it wouldn't mean you like this because there's enough different between them. But both of them gave you a very simple mechanism that expanded in a different way across the game. And for me, they both worked in that way. Now, the problem with it is that when you play this game over 3 hours, and which was, like 9 rounds, and you have somewhere between like 3 and 5 workers to place each round. That's a lot of actions of doing very basic worker placement. And so the story was fun. The story beats in it were fun. Even the mechanisms were fun enough, but they did get redundant for me over that time period. So that would be my only complaint and hesitation. Steve wanted to set it up and go right away again. Like we finished the game. He's like, this is what I want to do the rest of the afternoon. I was like, no, I'm not going to do this again right away, but I'd be happy to do it again in a few months or 6 months or whatever. One of my favorite things about the story part, though, is that you would get to certain events that would happen almost at the start of every round. There might be an event that happened, but other things could trigger them as well. And this story would happen, but there were some times where it would say, okay, hand the app to X player. And then that player would basically have a private interaction with somebody that nobody else knew about. And they even might make a change, like a decision that would impact future state of the game. And only they knew about the potential ramifications of it. So that was really exciting and really fun to feel like you really were interacting with these characters and kind of building out your own story. And I liked it. I liked a lot of what this did here. It definitely blew my expectations away just based on the little bit that I'd heard about it. But again, just keep in mind that it is a basic worker placement game. If you're looking for unique or advanced mechanisms, you're not going to find it. If you don't mind sitting through a lot of story reading and you want that to explore that story, you're going to enjoy this.
Chris, where do you sit on the storytelling versus mechanisms? Are you going to go back to this one? How often are you going to go back to this one?
I would go back to this one. Maybe this is a kind of a once every few months kind of game, just because it is so lengthy. Reality is I'm probably not going to get this one played at home because nobody here is going to want to play a light worker placement game for 3 hours with me. That's probably just the situation. Maybe I get my family to play it, but probably not. I would be willing to. And the mechanisms, what Tim said is absolutely right. It's a very light, it needed to be. It's not that engaging from a rules perspective, but you put the combination of the storytelling, which I thought was wonderful, together with those light, manageable rules. And I thought the overall, meal deal you get out of this thing is well worth it. I hope that we play this one again next time we get together.
I will say, so Chris texted Adam right after we finished playing. He's like, Adam, I think you're going to absolutely love this one. And I couldn't disagree more. I don't think Adam's going to like this game at all. Adam, based on what you've heard, does this sound like something that's got you excited?
Only the production.
Yeah.
Huh, that's fair.
Yeah, I really want to see the production. I'd give it a chance because I have yet to see something with this kind of narrative that really engages me. So I would check it out just to check it out and get the experience, but I'm skeptical.
Yeah, that's how I think that Adam would approach it. Like, I think he's kind of indifferent about storytelling, and you got to sit there for 5 minutes for, after each round to listen to some story or have somebody read it to you. And then again, the mechanisms they get tired. I don't think Adam's got the patience for it. I'd be interested to hear if he says something different. On the other hand, it was a mix for me because I do like the blend if I'm with the right audience. But if I was sitting there with somebody who wasn't enjoying it, I would not be having much fun either.
Yeah.
Chris and Steve were clearly enjoying it, and it made it a fun experience for me. And I didn't mind doing it at all.
I think if I was at the table with Chris and Steve and to see their enjoyment, that would bring me in enough. I'd get into the flow of the game, and I could definitely get into this kind of a story narrative. If other people are enjoying it and my excitement will add to their excitement, that is going to make something like this very playable for me.
Yeah. And, Chris, it was funny. There was an app issue, and we looked it up because we're like, this doesn't make any sense what it's telling us. And so we looked up on Board Game Geek, and there was clearly a report of similar bugs for as far as a year back. And the designer TC Petty mentioned on there, oh yeah, we're gonna push an update soon. But this bug clearly still existed in our version, and so we checked in the middle of it. And Chris had a most recent version that just been updated a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully most of that stuff's worked out and will continue to be fixed. But we clearly still ran into a bug on our first playthrough, and that was disappointing because we kind of adjusted our play. Like we thought we knew how it would be resolved, but we might have missed something that was really fun or really important because of our choice. So that was a disappointment. The mistake that made with pulling things out of the tuck box, that was on me. And I don't think that particular mistake would happen again on another play, even if Chris was teaching it to new players, because it was clear once we understood what we messed up, what we could have done different. But that's always the problem with a legacy game that introduces rules in the middle, because somebody can't prep. Because they try to keep all this stuff spoiler free. You can't watch a video that's going to tell you exactly how to play the game. You can't go and check the rule book in advance and reread it to make sure you understand it. You're kind of in the middle going like, hey, let's get this flowing. So I think this is how it works. Let's do it. I've never played a legacy game where we didn't run into a couple hitches like that, where we got through a game and then realized, oops, yeah, we messed that round up. Let's try again or do it a little bit different. And that's always disappointing in a competitive, like you do this in a cooperative game. Who cares? Everyone's on the same footing. You all been working together, but you're doing it in a competitive game where some people were impacted negatively by the mistake. And then that's, of course, kind of ruins the competition, right? That's no fun. So not a terrible hit on it, but it was definitely something that can happen, I think, in any legacy style game. So, all right, cool. Well, let's jump into the next game that got picked. That was Distilled. And I don't remember who's pick. This might have been my pick. No, this was Steve's pick. I was so excited to go back to Distilled, and it hit perfectly for me. We had such a fun time playing this game. The one thing I'll call it before Chris talks is that what was unique is that we picked a new recipe set, and this recipe set only had recipes that required you to age your liquor. So any other set we've played, you kind of had an option depending on where you went. This one, except for the basic, the moonshine and whiskey? No, not whiskey, vodka. But besides those two, everything else had to be aged. So we really had to go after a different strategy here. And that was really, really fun and cool to explore. Chris, what do you think of this play Distilled?
I thought it was interesting and a lot of fun. And that change really did add some variety to the plays of this game. And there was actually one advanced recipe that did not require aging, but for sure the rest of them all required some aging, which really changes your strategy in this game. So instead of blasting through how many things can I get out in rapid succession, you have to give up a couple turns where you're just going to be making stuff that's going to end up getting cellared. And that's, there's an investment there. And so you really have to be careful in how you're going to do that, and whether are you going to sell, or are you going to hold out for a couple of rounds so you can get the big points from the aging cards. This game hit for me as good this time as it did in previous plays. And that's actually, I think, a really good recommendation for this game. We liked it all. We played it. We played it again subsequently and had a really good time. This is, I think, the 4th, 5th, 6th play I've had of it, and I've enjoyed every single one. I hold up this game as being one of my great successes with Kickstarter, that you really can get some games that are exceptional, that are a lot of fun, great production, all that, that whole package from a Kickstarter. This is one of those. I'm going to keep coming back to this one. I just really dig Distilled. And of course, I like the theme as well.
This is one I was sad that I missed. It looks fantastic. I had a lot of fun playing it the first time. I'm glad that it hit on this play for you guys as well. I have a question. Did everybody go after the bottles again? It seemed like everybody just went for bottles, get a lot of points from the bottles. It's a race for the glassware, the fancy promotional bottles.
Well, it was a little harder this time because, as Chris mentioned, we had to be aging stuff, which means you're not getting money every time selling. So the market that you had available to both spend on bottles as well as ingredients and things like that was just more restrictive on most turns. Sometimes you'd have a huge income and sometimes you wouldn't have much. So we definitely fought over them, but there wasn't anywhere near the competition. Nobody got a full set. Maybe Steve did, I remember, but it was like definitely, I think we all had a little bit more challenge in collecting what we needed as far as bottles. So it definitely felt like a very different strategy. We did finish out all of the general goals that everyone was going after. And there was a couple rounds where 2 people hit the same goal in that round, but it resulted in some tough decisions because you're like, oh man, I wanted to age this longer, but I got to sell it now so I can hit that goal. So yeah, definitely felt like a different play than our last one, Adam. Cool. Well, cool. Another good play of Distilled. And because we were on alcohol board game kick, my next choice was Viticulture. Yeah. Now, the reason I picked Viticulture was because, I like Viticulture anyway, but I really like it with Tuscany. And I haven't had too many opportunities to play it with Tuscany in a multiplayer setting. And I mentioned this right before Chris came out, and he's like, well, I'll pick it up. So he picked up Tuscany, and I thought, well, he bought this expansion for me to play with. Let's get it played. But I also think Viticulture at 3 players is the best way to play. So it was a perfect opportunity. I loved it. It was so much fun playing this. In fact, I've only played it 2 players, I think, with Tuscany. And with 3 players, it was fantastic for me. I thought it was great. I thought what Tuscany added, the structure variability, the unique player types you can pick up, the area control in it, the bonuses that you can trigger on all these different seasons. It just worked so great for me and probably escalated. I think Viticulture just even went up a little bit more for me after that play. Now, I did crush these guys. And I don't think it was because of unique experience. I mean, the game plays basically the same as other games. I don't know what happened this time. So maybe that helped my enjoyment of it. But I really had fun with this one. I'm curious how Chris felt about it because him and Steve didn't seem like they were having quite as much fun. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I won't lie to you. It probably had very little to do with the game. And it also may be part of the reason why you crushed us. At least for me, we got started pretty late on this one. It was pretty late in the evening. I was super tired. We'd all had a few drinks. So I'm trying to sort of distance myself from my my emotional and physical state at the moment when we were playing it. And honestly, I can see why this is the only way you'd want to play Viticulture. There was a lot of really cool stuff that Tuscany added in there. Of the things it added, I think the one that I'd probably say I could, take or leave is the area control. The area majority. I thought that was kind of like, yeah, whatever. I didn't really care about that. But I really did like the cards. The new cards that were added in, the new buildings, which I didn't get any of, but I saw you guys using and were really quite interesting. And I like the fact that now it was spread out into 4 seasons rather than the 2 seasons. And I guess in reality, the original, OG Viticulture is 4 seasons, but all you do is get a card during 2 of those seasons. Now you actually have 4 different seasons worth of work you can do. It added more worker placement spaces to the board, and they were all interesting ones. I really enjoyed that. And it included a better turn order mechanism than before. Before you got to bid on the turn order, essentially. Here, not only are you putting down a bid for the turn order, but you're also going to get different benefits over the course of the round. So, for example, if you pick the second or third spot from the top, it means you're going to go fairly early in the turn order, but then you may get one other benefit that comes up in a different season, or some light benefit in the fall. When you get down to the bottom, each season you're moving that little chicken one more space, along with the season. And each season you're going to get some benefit. And by the time you're at the end, the bottom track, you're getting huge benefits. You're getting an extra worker. You're getting the guaranteed opportunity to go first next time. So I thought that was really neat. Overall, I thought the things that Tuscany added were definitely worthwhile, with the possible exception of the area majority. And I would love to play this one again sometime when I'm not quite so tired and had too much wine in my belly.
So, Tim, it sounds like you only won because Chris was tired, but what stands out to you about this game that sets it apart from original Viticulture?
Well, it's definitely just that there's more interesting things to do in it. It doesn't feel as dry. It's not just worker placement, but also like even in a 2-player game, there's now some bonuses for going to a space.
So it doesn't feel as dry. You'd say it feels a little more fruity and sweet?
Yeah, it's a little bold, oaky, kind of buttery. No, but like especially in a 3-player game, you know how like if you play a 3-player game of regular Viticulture, the first person to go to a space gets a bonus, second person gets just the basic action. In this one, there's several spaces now where even the second person would get some bonus, and then if you went through grande work, you wouldn't get it at all. So just more variety in the way that you're interacting with the action spaces and motivations to go there. The area control thing that Chris is talking about is that there's a little map of Italy down in the bottom corner of the board, and there's an action you can take, and there's other ways to get these stars, but you can take an action that lets you put one of your 6 stars out on this map. And the reason why that space is cool is that it's basically just a super flexible space. When you put a star there, you choose what region you're going to cover, and you get the bonus that's printed on the region. And it's usually one of any of the different types of cards, or it's some denomination of money. So really what it's giving you is you're saying, hey, I really need a purple card or I need a green card. Well, in the first season, I can go get whatever card I want to, and if you're the first person to go to that space, you get to put 2 of them down. So that just gives you more flexibility in what you're trying to accomplish and a way to do it. And then the area control works like, whoever has a majority in a region at the end of the game is going to get the points printed out. It might be 1 or 2 points. And that does a couple things. It gives you a motivation to continue to try to rush there and get more stars put out. But also, there's endgame scoring that's going to be impactful now. It gives people a chance to actually potentially still be in the game, even if their tempo got hit a little bit early on. Problem with Viticulture sometimes, like one person gets the first couple wines built, and then everyone else is two rounds behind. It's almost impossible to catch up.
Yeah.
Well, now you can have a little bit of a surprise at the end. Now it's pretty visible, printed on the map, but you can jockey, and everyone can be like, okay, it looks like Tim's winning. Move your stars over there so he doesn't get majority in that space. And so it's just some player interaction. I like it personally, but I can see why it might not hit as a main mechanism. But I think if you think of it as just a space to be able to take more diverse actions or variable actions, I think it works pretty well. And probably the main motivation for putting it on there. The structure cards is the other thing I really like. You can normally build a structure, and you've got like 8 standard structures you can build over the course of the game. Literally, these orange cards you can pick up now, that it's just 100 different cards, and they're all different structures. And so you've got a mat next to your board that lets you play 2 different structures. And these structures could do any number of things. They'll give you a point as soon as you place them. So that's one reason to build one. But they'll also either give you a new worker placement space or give you some ongoing effect. And it just makes the game play so different. The engine building part of it plays so differently. The original Viticulture, where you always knew what the possible things were to do there. So it just adds more variability. I think everything about Tuscany adds variety to the game and fun and bonuses and all the things that I like in a Euro game. So that's why I like it.
Okay.
All right. So we wrapped up Monday. Our last day was Tuesday. I was going to be flying out early evening the next day. So we only had a little time in our Airbnb. And so we wanted to start with a fairly quick game. And Steve had a dentist appointment. So Chris and I busted out Motor City, which was one of the last games that Chris brought that was on his shelf of shame. I'd played it several times before, so I wanted to teach it to him. We got right into it, probably knocked out a game in 45 minutes or something like that. Chris, what do you think of Motor City?
I was shocked at how much I liked Motor City. I loved Motor City, and I loved getting another game off of my shelf of shame. So win for that one. No, I think this game is great. It actually came in, my goodness, it feels like 6 months, a year ago, maybe. It was quite a while ago this game came in, and I just kind of put it up on the shelf and never thought twice about it. I mean, roll and writes don't get me super excited generally. I enjoy them, but this one, it didn't take up a whole lot of space in my mind. But then I saw it sitting on the shelf when I was packing up the stuff to bring with me to the con. And I saw this one and I figured I'll stick it in the bag just in case, we get a chance to play it. I know Tim knows how to play it. And I absolutely was blown away by it. You got these 4 tracks you're moving on. The track you move on is based on a dice that you select, and then the dice that you select also gives you some kind of a bonus based on where the dice is placed on this central playmat. And then you move up one of these tracks, and then you start moving up one track, and then it gives you a bonus on another track, and that gives you a bonus on another track, and then you're comboing these bonuses, and then you're also filling in these spots where you get these end game scoring if you manage to meet all these different requirements. And just the combos in this thing were absolutely freaking amazing. And I can already see the look of like dismay in Adam's eyes. I don't think he's a big, huge fan of the combo goodness, but I really enjoyed this one. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I've been angling ever since I got home, with my wife to play a game of it this weekend. So great game. I'm dying to play it again. Now, Adam, with all the combos in there, does this sound like anything of any interest to you? The sort of comboing your combos?
Well, potentially, Chris. My issue with the comboiness, if there's 4 players and everybody on their turn, we got to watch 3 other players do 18 combos before it gets back to me. Then I get a little sick of combos. If it's just 2 people, I get to do my combos, you do your combos. Wow, that's pretty neat. And then I don't know, is there any interactivity with the combos, or is it just looking down, you're doing your own thing?
So the main interactivity here is it's a dice drafting game. So it's almost got like a Legrand dice drafting where you roll some dice and then those are the actions that can be drafted for that turn, with some fun extra bonus that depending on where you draft that dice from, you're going to get an extra resource or bonus or whatever. So that's about the only interaction. Now, what we did on our second play, Chris immediately wanted to play it again, and Steve had just gotten back, so we played a 3-player game, but we were limited on time. So to rush through it, we just said, once you draft your dice, the next person will draft theirs, and then we'll keep going so that you draft your dice, you just take the actions on your board, and then the next person drafts. So you're not waiting for anybody. And that's kind of the level of interaction, meaning it doesn't matter what anyone else does at all. It really doesn't matter at all. So it is just a very solo game other than that dice drafting piece of it. Okay. And so if you are there to have interaction with other people, this isn't really the game for you. But if you want to play a solitaire combo puzzle, then this will be a fun game for you. Okay. Well, glad you liked that one, Chris. Great crunchy roll and write if you're into that type of thing. But that's probably if you're not into roll and writes with lots of combos in, it's probably not going to change your mind. All right, so we had to check out our Airbnb, and we had time for one more game. We went over to Mox Boarding House, our favorite Portland gaming center, which is a beautiful restaurant with a big game store in front and great gaming space at the tables. So we went over there just to have a few drinks and play one more game. Steve and I really wanted to get Outlive in since Chris owns this game, and we only get to play it with Chris. I had a blast with Outlive again. I love this game so much. It's so thematic. It's so tough. What a fun Euro for me. Just love going back to it. I want this game again, but I want the retail version of it. Glad I gave the big old Kickstarter production to Chris. Chris, how did Outlive go for you? Are you still enjoying it?
Yeah, I love this game. It's great. Adam knows it's brutal. Watching your people die every round because you can't give them enough meat or not enough water. I mean, that's sad. Nobody likes doing that. What I did like was seeing the different routes to victory here, or the different potential routes to victory. Obviously, there can only be one victor, but I went all in on solving the events. You went all in on having all kinds of different equipment. Steve went all in by building rooms and filling them up with people. Steve ended up pulling off the win on this one, but I think it was a relatively close game. I think I came in last. I wasn't able to quite pull up to you guys with all the events, but there's a lot of ways to play this game, a lot of ways to win. And it's always a fun story. It's always a good game, even if it's a little depressing watching your people starve to death. Wah, wah.
Well, I'm mostly happy and a little bit sad that I wasn't there to watch all my people die and suffer in this post-apocalyptic world of Outlive. Tim, how you already said you enjoyed this game once again.
Yeah, I did. And it's a reminder that the game has a bit of upkeep in between rounds, and it's a bit of setup. And it's one of these games that's adding stuff for thematic purposes, like Nemesis did, right? But I think it does it at just the right amount. If you want a really thematic Euro, this one still reigns. It makes you feel like every action you're taking, it makes sense with what you're collecting and where you're collecting it and why you're doing it. And it's worth it for the little bit of extra upkeep and rules overhead, I think, on this. So yeah, still remains fun for me. It's kind of surprising to me, in all honesty, because this was an early Euro game I got introduced to, and I could imagine this being one of those games where, like, well, yeah, I haven't played a whole lot of games, so of course I liked it. Now I've played all these other games, and it's just not as streamlined, or it's not quite as interesting. But I still love playing it. I still love going back to it. So definitely still a hit for me. And glad we got a chance to play. Mock's Boarding House, by the way, again, and we've mentioned this on previous episodes, but if you live in Portland, I think there's one in Seattle as well, is just a wonderful store. The folks working there were great. Their game collection, I love just being in the store at the front of the place. They have every game you can imagine on the shelves there, and it's just a joy to walk through there and look at all those games. So check that place out if you're in town. My favorite game store that I've ever been to.
Same here.
Chris went and dropped me off at Steve's place before he had to head home. I had just a little time before I went to the airport, so I went to Steve's local hangout bar and we played Azul with the bartender. He had the little mini version of Azul, so I just wanted to mention that really quick. There's like a travel version, which is pretty solid. It's obviously nicer to play with the bigger version, but sitting at a bar playing on the counter was great. So had a fun time doing that and getting to know his little local life there. Otherwise, flew back home, and it was a wrap for another BGHT convention. Maybe we'll be back to Portland in a couple of years. We'll see where the next one is. But had a great time with you guys. I think we mentioned a little bit on the last episode that I think this was my favorite convention we've done so far. And it's hard to say, was it because of our choice to leave out tournament scoring, or was it something else? Was it just the great selection of games? I'm not sure, but I really had a really fun time. Almost everything was wonderful to do there. Couple quick queries. We're running along here, but what was your guys' biggest surprise as far as games played over this weekend? The one that beat your expectations significantly?
Well, that's an easy one. It was Motor City. I went into it with absolutely zero expectations, and I walked away going, I want to play this game again and again and again and again, and hopefully I'll be playing it again this weekend.
Biggest surprise for me in a bad way was Lords of Ragnarok. I was really hoping for a hit with that one. The production was fantastic. The theme was cool. The rules teach sounded neat, but the execution was abysmal. A surprise in a good way was Battle for Rokugan. Everybody seemed to love that one. I had a good time playing. I finally got to play it, and it landed nicely. So I really enjoyed that one. What about for you, Tim?
Well, I had a couple really nice surprises here, but the clear winner for me was the Battle for Rokugan. Adam had talked about it before, and it sounded slightly interesting, but I looked at the production, and I just didn't really have any expectations at all on it. And I had such a fun time playing that game. In fact, I already hit up my local game group here to see if anyone's got a copy they want to sell. And there's a few people that are like, yeah, it's been sitting on my shelf of shame for years. Let me think about it. So maybe I'll have a copy myself pretty soon.
Nice.
So really enjoyed that one. And Adam, the next question was going to be biggest disappointment, which you beat me to, unfortunately. But Chris, why don't you jump in? Biggest disappointment.
Clearly, that was Lords of Ragnarok. I had such high hopes for this game, and then to have it crash and burn so hard, not just with me, but with everybody. I mean, what a dismal experience that was. I think the first time we've ever declined to finish a game at one of our cons. And that really says something. So, thankfully, that was the only big miss of the weekend. And I also do want to put in as my runner-up for the biggest surprise, I'll also say Battle for Rokugan. I think still Motor City pulls it out for me because I got such a dopamine hit from the combos in Motor City. But Battle for Rokugan was a clear second in that case.
Adam, you want to change your answer on biggest disappointment or still sticking with Lords of Ragnarok?
No, it's a clear winner. If I was forced to pick something, I think Nemesis lost a little bit for me just because of the repetitive nature. The story was there, but the length and the rolling for noise just got a little tedious for me. I still had fun playing it, but if I have to pick something other than Lords of Ragnarok, I think Nemesis is going to do a soft second.
Well, I didn't have very high expectations for Lords of Ragnarok, so it didn't take away biggest disappointment. The game that actually did was Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy. And this shouldn't be a surprise for me because I've had several frustrating plays of Eclipse in the past, but there's so much interesting and fun things that happen in that game that I always get excited about it. It's like that long distance girlfriend that you have a miserable time when you're there with them, but then when you're away, you miss it a little bit. And that's what Eclipse Second Dawn was. It was a reminder that it can lead to bad plays, even though there can still be fun with it. Doesn't mean I don't want to play it again, but I just really had high expectations to go in and have a fun time playing this game. And there was just some really frustrating moments as a reminder. So last question, favorite new to you games? Is it something different than your biggest surprise?
I had so many pleasant surprises this weekend. I can be lame and say, yeah, it was Motor City. But honestly, I had a bunch of games there that were all absolutely delightful to play. I mean, it was Quacks of Quedlinburg, Cat in the Box, Battle for Rokugan, My Father's Work, which was saddled a little bit by the lengthy gameplay, but it was still a great game. Motor City, so many good plays. So rather than picking that one, I'm just going to say we played a lot of new games this weekend that I really enjoyed, and that to me is the real win of the situation. Is they have so many games that I realized that were ones I already own that I really like, or new ones that I've really learned that I like. I'll still maybe give Motor City that little bit of an edge because that was such a surprise to me. But so many great new games we played this weekend.
Yeah, the format of this convention this time around let us get a bunch of new games out there, which was a delight. And I was absolutely charmed by Robot Quest Arena, which Chris taught, and the gameplay just flowed so easily. I had such a fun time playing that one. So I'm going to give best new to me to Robot Quest Arena.
Nice. Yeah. I had a great time with most of the new games that we played as well. And since I already mentioned the Battle for Rokugan, I guess I'll call out Robot Quest Arena for me as well. I definitely think the Battle for Rokugan hit a little bit harder with me, but I think Robot Quest Arena did surprise me by the success of its production and the success of how that tactical combat worked. So maybe that should have been biggest surprise and I should have reversed him. I don't know. But yeah, great game anyway. And I'm just going to mention too that my favorite gameplay of the weekend, which didn't hit those categories, but my favorite gameplay of the entire weekend was Terraforming Mars. And I think one of the reasons that I was favorite for me is that it reminded me why I love this game so much. Every game every play of it isn't as fun as this one, but I've never had a bad play of it. And this was so much fun to revisit after a little while away from it. So, all right. Well, I think that will wrap us up this week. We do have several more reviews to catch up on, but we'll do that next week since we're going long today. I hope you all enjoyed our coverage of Board Game Hot Takes Con in Portland. Maybe we'll be back in Long Beach next time. I think that's likely, hopefully in about 6 months or so. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.